What was that? I'm John Williams, the chair of the North Wales Police and Crime Panel, and I welcome everyone here today to this meeting. And can I remind everyone that translation facilities are available. Moving on to the agenda, we've got two apologies for absence, Councillor Non David and Councillor Mark Jones. Do we have any declarations of interest, please? Councillor Bissell.
I'm a board member and trustee of DASU.
Thank you. And Councillor Emery.
Yeah, a new one for me, which probably could wait till the next meeting, but I might as well get used to saying it. My husband starts a new job on the 3rd of January. He is counter-terrorism security advisor for the Welsh counter-terrorism unit. So technically he works under North Wales Police, but not paid by North Wales Police. I'll have a quicker way of saying that next time round, but he starts January the 3rd.
Thank you for that. Moving on to item 3, urgent matters. I'm not aware of any urgent matters now. Okay. Announcements by the chair, item 4. Can I just take this opportunity to thank the Commissioner and the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, the Chief Constable of North Wales Police, for holding the familiarisation day on Wednesday, which we found extremely interesting and informative. And I think everybody went there really enjoyed the day. So thank you very much for that. And also to the officers involved as well, the firearms officers and the drones officers. Yeah, thank you. Item 5, the minutes. We can approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of September. Can I remind members that the minutes are for approval only and not for discussion? Is there a proposer? Okay, and a seconder. Thank you.
Say about for approval, but in the minutes on page 5, it mentions that the PCP considered the candidates responsive to their questions. Should those questions be included within the minutes? On this document? Yeah, yes. They are. Okay. Thank you. All right, thank you.
Okay. If everybody's happy, can I ask the members to show their hands if they agree with the minutes, please? Okay, thank you for that. Item 6A, which is an update on actions from the previous meeting. Commissioner or Stephen, do you have any updates on any actions from the previous minutes at all?
No, as far as I'm aware, all the actions have been dealt with.
Any members wish to bring up any actions from the minutes at this stage? There are 3 sets of questions to the PCC with responses to the PCC attached. And I think everybody's got them, yes? Anybody got any questions in relation to them, or are we happy with that? Yes, Councillor.
Yes, yeah, I submitted my questions again because the answers were given by the Chief Constable at the time in a general way in his report, and I specifically wanted, questions answered so the board could share those and in a more pertinent way. So I'm very grateful for the responses that I've had so far. But with due respect, I mean, they've led to further questions, and Dawn assures me that I've wasted all my particular time now in terms of supplementaries and can't ask any further questions. This was, of course, in relation to accusations or allegations of domestic abuse or sexual harassment against members of the force and how these are dealt with. My original question arose out of the Sarah Everard case, where the police officer responsible for the murder actually had allegations made against him for sexual harassment and so on. So there were large questions there, really. So I appreciate the answers that I've received, but with due respect for me, they need to further questions, and I can't ask those further questions now because I've exhausted my my allowance, as it were. So I'm just wondering, could we in fact have a report on this, a further report on this from the Police and Crime Commissioner, and the way that these are dealt with. For example, one of the answers, it mentions a threshold as to those particular cases which are dealt with by the force under the internal disciplinary procedures, and those which are then passed on for criminal investigation and prosecution, presumably. I'm just wondering what that threshold is, how high the threshold is, because again, I think that's very pertinent. And again, it mentions to the penalties that are imposed on those particular officers who are dealt with internally. And again, I think it's appropriate that we know what those kind of penalties are really, so we can be assured that these matters are being dealt with properly and in a manner which I think would meet the public approval. Of course, since the original question I put, as I said, in relation to the Sarah Everard case, there have been further comments and accusations on this very topic in relation to the Wentforce, hasn't there really? And you know, the accusations of systemic misogyny, sexual harassment, and so on in that particular force. So I think they're very pertinent questions to be asked and to have adequate answers to. I mean, we need to satisfy ourselves as members of the panel that these matters are being dealt with properly. I don't want names and so on and so forth. It's just the way that these particular cases are being dealt with and the nature of those complaints and cases which we deal with internally. And again, I'm not sure really how we operate this, because I used to be on the old North Wales Police Authority, and there was a disciplinary department within the force at that time dealing with these matters. But there was also a subcommittee of the police authority, which I was chair of on stage, and we used to do dip sampling on occasions and look into the way the cases have been dealt with to satisfy ourselves and the authority that these have been dealt with in an appropriate way to raise concerns that we might have. So I think there's room here for a further report on this, if we may, if we can ask that, please, so that we can rest assured that these matters are being dealt with appropriately in the North Wales Force, and in fact that we can then give that assurance to the general public of North Wales as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Bethel. It's a very topical matter to say the least. I mean, Commissioner,
Yeah, diolch. Thanks for the question, Councillor Bithell, and quite right to be asking those questions. That's the purpose of the panel being here today, in my opinion. Very pertinent, as you said. But to give assurances in the short term, we have got violence against women and girls as a deep dive for our strategic executive board meeting, which has been coming up. We also do scrutinise the PSD board as well through the chief executive there. And of course, we have regular updates, fortnightly updates from the Deputy Chief Constable as well. But more than happy to pick up the questions that you feel as though we haven't had a satisfactory answer. That's not good enough in my opinion, and more than happy for the report to be produced for panel members.
I'm not saying they weren't satisfactory. I think the Chief Executive answered the question
Yeah.
I asked, and those questions.
Yeah. Just the detail, isn't it, now?
These
Yeah.
are the questions. And I think it needs to be looked at a bit more in depth.
Absolutely.
Really, as to how these matters are dealt with.
Yeah.
So that's the reason I raised it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. Diolch.
Chris, what will you do? Send an email through to Dawn with your specific questions on it and the view report. Okay. Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. I had my mic on before. I've got a question regarding a question from people to the Commissioner. Yeah. Why do these come to this committee? Because obviously he's had an answer. He said he hasn't had an answer. He hadn't had the answer that he wants, or is it that he hasn't had one? But the Commissioner said he's had an answer to his letter and told him where to get his information that he wanted from, and he seems to be trying to make the agenda for this panel. And I think that dwi'n pan bod fi siarad Saesneg, Gymraeg, ond darparangeisydd dwi'n gweld y dyn yma am y job ei hun. A wedyn dwi'n meddwl na ni dda hyn cael ei gyrru ymlaen i'r bobl wedi ateb y cwestiynau maen nhw'n ofyn yn hytrach na dod i'r panel yma i wastio amser ddweud gwir. Diolch.
The members of the public have the right to ask questions for the protocol. We've got a protocol which members of the public are allowed to ask questions of the Commissioner.
Yes, but the Commissioner has already answered this question apparently. So why does it come to the panel?
Well,
That's the question I'm asking.
Because he's then come back to the panel, we've now responded to that and said that we're not answering that question because it basically he's had the answers to the questions which he posed. And from reading the letter which he sent in, the questions were substantially more or less the same. So we declined to give him the answers to that. Okay, thank you for that. Feedback from member champions. I mean, I don't suppose anybody's got any feedback really, because we've only just sort of started up, but sorry, yeah. Councillor Emery, please.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm just sort of warming into the role, I suppose, and I was a bit unsure as to what the role was to begin with, because I thought we were here to scrutinise the commissioner, with all due respect, and therefore the commissioner's sort of budget really. So I thought the finance champion role was focusing on, which obviously a very small part of the overall police budget, but I believe the champion role is more about oversight of the 182 million. So, which is quite difficult for me to do at a level that I would normally do as a councillor, because obviously as a councillor, when we're overseeing the council budget, you spend many meetings and scrutiny and budget working groups. So you have a much better understanding of the budget. And obviously this is not the role for me to be able to know the budget at such detail. So I'm kind of finding my feet with it. I'm obviously meeting Kate before the meeting on the 30th of January to sort of go through that. But I just wanted to sort of warn the panel really that I can't give it the scrutiny that I would do as a local authority councillor, because I'd have to spend hours and hours with Kate, go to audit committees, etc., etc. So it's a bit of a strange role really, because so I don't want to let you all down, but I can obviously look at the budget and I can look at what Kate tells me, but in order to say, well, why are you doing that and not this? That gets operational, and that's not really my role. So I am, as you know, struggling to work out where my responsibilities lie, but I'm sure I'll find a way.
Yeah, thanks for that. We appreciate that. I mean, in terms of some panels don't even have member champions. It's as easy as that. So I mean, I think we're one up on a lot of panels in that we can go to the Commission's office, and we do get responses in that manner. But I mean, in reality, we've got a small budget. Councillors have got a lot of things on their time, and we can only do so much, and we just got to keep an eye on it as best as we can, I think. Yeah.
Can I just give feedback on a day that we had in November on the Fatal Five? We had Wayne was there, weren't you, Wayne, and members of North Wales Police, i.e. Roads Policing Unit. We had the fire service, 2 doctors, 2 emergency doctors, magistrate, former prosecutor, chief prosecutor. Who else was there? Yeah. And it was a mock trial for 6 formers who had, some of them who had started to drive and others who were about to drive, based on the Fatal Five. And it was a very productive day. I would have thought it was a useful day too, wasn't it? And there's been a lot of positive from the school, the secondary school in question. So we're hoping that we'll be able to do it again. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I think it was it was really effective, particularly for the students who came to it, and I think we managed to get the message across to them quite effectively. And because it was delivering the message in a number of different agencies, you know, particularly the thing from sort of the doctors, and then listening to the roads policing officers who go to the scenes, and then the sort of legal bit as well, because quite a lot of the students had an interest, didn't they, in law and that kind of thing. And I think they definitely got an awful lot out of it.
It was students ran the day according to a script, and then there were mentors from the different professions. So hopefully there is a requested from another school. So feedback on that.
Is item 7, which is the presentation on the Checkpoint Cymru programme. Anna Baker is going to take this item. Thank you, Anna. Welcome. And the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt. Prynhawn da, good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation, and a pleasure to be able to share some of the good work with you that's been undertaken at Checkpoint Cymru recently. I'm acutely aware that there's people in the room who may not have been around when we first went live, so I would take the opportunity to take you down memory lane a little bit, if I may. And for those of you who have heard it before, I'll apologise in advance. So in terms of Checkpoint, it was an idea that was put together by our previous commissioner, Mr. Arfon Jones. He was progressive in his thinking and liked what he saw being delivered over in Durham, who were delivering the original Checkpoint diversion programme. He wanted to replicate it in North Wales, and it also fitted in nicely with the LAMI report in terms of addressing the triggers to offending behaviour, and often prevention is better than cure. And luckily, fast forward to now, we have a commissioner who is equally as supportive of the programme, who appreciates the hard work and the efforts that goes into it, along with police officers. So although originally a custody-based diversion, it soon became apparent that many of the cases that we were trying to tackle were actually going to be coming into voluntary interviews and stop search as well as custody. So in terms of what Checkpoint is, it is a multi-agency initiative where we seek to reduce the number of victims of crime by reducing reoffending. We're tackling the underlying causes of the offending behaviour, such as mental health, substance use, financial issues, to name but a few, and it does provide an alternative to the criminal justice system. So on the basis of that, we then decided our strapline should be reducing reoffending and improving life chances, and Checkpoint Cymru was born. How we went about to do this? Well, first of all, we needed to understand eligibility. So who was eligible for Checkpoint? So it's individuals who are resident to North Wales. The offence must have taken place in North Wales. They must be 18 or over, and they must admit guilt. We don't accept cases of no comment interview or won't take or accept responsibility for the offence. We need a baseline, we need a starting point when working with somebody, and at least if there's an admission there, you've got a starting point. In terms of eligibility of the offences, we take anything that is suitable for an out-of-court disposal as per the gravity matrix, which is our Bible. But the cases that we won't accept is domestic violence or domestic abuse and assault against emergency service workers. However, we do accept some low-level hate crime cases, and I'm pleased to be able to say that we have a very good working relationship with the CPS in Wales, and a unique arrangement whereby when there are low-level hate crime cases that come through, we can liaise with them to ensure that they are suitable for diversion and deferred prosecution, and long may that relationship continue. We do require an inspector's approval on it though, so we do make sure that it is very much a belts and braces approach. Once referred into Checkpoint, it's voluntary at the point of access, but thereafter it is mandated. And the contract that we stipulate for individuals to abide to, that they are not to reoffend over the period of the contract, that they do take part in a restorative approach in restorative justice if the victim requests it. They attend the sessions with all relevant agencies and they engage fully with my team. And if they're unlucky enough to come across me, that they engage with me too. And to complete any voluntary community work that we would deem suitable. As you can imagine, during the pandemic, we weren't allowed out of our homes, were we, let alone anything else. So there was no voluntary work undertaken at that point. When somebody is referred into Checkpoint, there is a very intensive assessment that takes place, a holistic approach to look at all underlying needs and issues, and they are mental health, physical health, drug use, alcohol use, education, training and employment, accommodation and ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and any trauma that they've experienced that underpins the decisions that they are making as adults. So providing that we can fulfill against the contract that an individual does engage with us, the benefits of the scheme are really quite simple. It's a reduction in reoffending, it's a reduction in the number of victims, safer communities, and positive contribution to the community by those individuals that we are supporting. But equally and importantly to services out there, it is a reduction in the demand in the longer term as well as the short term on frontline police and partner agencies and stakeholders alike. Which then comes to the question of, so what do these navigators have to do? What are their qualifications in terms of the support that they're offering people? When we originally went out to advert, we were asking people to be educated to HNC level or possess relevant evidenced experience. Relevant experience working in either the voluntary sector or the criminal justice system, experience of developing effective partnerships in a multi-agency arena and preparing individual support plans, very, very important. Good literacy, numerical skills and IT skills to include report and statement writing. I think my IT skills have failed me this afternoon, so I probably wouldn't get a job. Full driving licence, and we have a sliding scale of minimum Welsh language requirements. So in terms of the Western area, all my navigators are fluent Welsh speakers, and then it reduces as you go towards the east. But there is a Welsh language facility across the patch. And of course, I am myself a fluent Welsh language speaker. So the navigator will undertake approximately 70% of the work, but there are some elements that we cannot do, that we are not equipped to do. So for example, we can't offer financial advice because we're not regulated to do so. And in those instances, we will refer to Citizens Advice, to Department of Work and Pensions for support. Anybody who requires clinical interventions such as opiate substitute treatment, anything particularly for physical health or extreme mental health, then any kind of clinical intervention of that need we would refer on. And of course, we don't carry houses in our back pockets, so we would be referring on for housing. And then, of course, as we were getting started and warming up, we were struck with a pandemic and we needed to adapt. In terms of adapting, we responded by working from home as guided. Assessments were undertaken over the phone, interventions were over the phone. And when periods would allow in lockdown, we had phased return into community settings, into police stations and partner agencies, as and when places were open. Bearing in mind that we were quite fortunate, really, working out of North Wales Police, because North Wales Police doesn't shut, does it? So we had the ability to be able to see people, whereas other agencies may not have been so fortunate. But despite the virus, we did continue to make changes throughout lockdown, one of which was the drug education programme, which was originally designed to be a classroom-based course, similar to a driver awareness course, if you like. But again, it was delivered on a one-to-one basis, and in order to ensure that we were getting the most out of it, we were asking that people undertook a minimum of 2 sessions over the phone, which gave them a period of reflection. The DEP itself obviously opened our eyes a little bit into the trends and what was emerging during the lockdown. And of course, whilst everybody was at home isolating, those who unfortunately are addicted to substances were out and were more easily identifiable and were referred onto ourselves. And of course, we had to undertake one-to-one sessions on the phone so that the workload was increased for the team at that point. The interesting aspect was that males actually opened up more on the phone, almost like the barrier in between individuals allowed them to open up, whereas females much prefer that face-to-face interaction. And of course, that's useful to know when moving forward, when you're future-proofing a programme. So the drug education programme by today, we are back to the classroom. Our classes are booked in advance. We look to try and book 6 to 12 months worth of spaces at venues to make sure that we can fill the seats as much as possible. And of course, we're targeting more people at once rather than doing that one-to-one. So in turn, that means that the workload is less for the team in that sense. So by assessing each person's needs and making the relevant referrals, it means that we not only work within our own skill set, but we benefit from the expertise of partner agencies. And these are only a small number of agencies that we work with. But you will see from that slide, Dawn, that's that we work with Kaleidoscope, Dechrau Newydd, Adferiad, previously Cais, Woolwich, Gorwel, Dasu, the North Wales Women's Centre, Betsy Cadwallader, Hafal, and DWP. And as I say, that's just a small snapshot, really. It's the navigators' bread and butter to understand what services are local in their communities. And as I'm sure we all know in the room, particularly third sector agencies can come and go quite a lot dependent on funding. So it is absolutely key and essential that the navigators are on point in knowing what support services are in their localities, as well as the mainstream ones. So on to the pressing question, I guess. I've told you all the good stuff that we're meant to be doing, but what does the data actually tell us? In terms of offences, you'll see from this, from April 21 to March 22, 90% of the offences referred to us were drugs possession. And they were then followed by public order, criminal damage, drunken disorderly, section 47 assaults, some child neglect, possession of weapons. There's quite a good mix there, but there is no doubt that drugs was the main one. And in terms of drugs offences, it is possession that's referred on to us. We have had 1 or 2 cultivation, but never supply. And that's what makes up our drug offences for those individuals that go onto the drug education programme. If we look at successful completions, and bear with me while I just enlarge my screen so I can see it. Of the 406 successful completions into checkpoint in that period, you will see from the slide that there was 210 DEP cases that completed successfully and 196. The spread across the patches were relatively even, around the 30% mark, and whether it comes as any great surprise, I don't know, but in terms of completions by gender, the majority of our referrals tend to be male. And as you will see from that, we had a split of 76% males to 24% females. Then when we look at the recidivism rate, of those individuals that completed successfully overall, you will see that 73% of the cases were not linked to any further occurrences, which would leave 27% there or thereabouts that were linked to other occurrences. And when we say linked to occurrences, they were either arrested, charged, or suspects. But actually, if we're looking at the ones who were simply charged, that actually equates to 3.5%. So the success rate, if you incorporate everything, is 73%. But actually, of everyone that was charged, you could read it as 97%. And in terms of recidivism by gender, 79% of them were males and 21% were females. So if we just break down the recidivism by the 2 elements of the programme, so checkpoint, of the, I believe, 134 suspects, individuals rather, 68.4% had no links to further criminality, so neither arrested, charged or suspected of anything. And 32 were, but of that 32%, only 5.1% were charged with a further offence. So I think it's safe to say at this point, although it's a one-year snapshot, but when I did my own very simplistic trawl through the cases from the very beginning, we were looking at similar rates. So I think you'd agree that that is a success. The drug education programme, of the 210 individuals who were on the drug education programme, 164 again were not linked to any other occurrences, arrested, charged or suspect of any criminality. So that would equate to 73.4% success there, and 22% were linked to further occurrences. But again, of that percentage, the ones that were actually charged with an offence was 1.9%. So when looking ahead to the next 12 months, what is it we want to do? What is it we want to achieve? For us, it's still looking at what we missed in 2020. We were struck by a pandemic early on, and I think you've got to rethink your aims and objectives when something like that occurs. To look at the gaps in support, to do more restorative work, more restorative justice. Again, it's about bringing people together and conferences, which we couldn't do during the pandemic. But I am delighted to say that we did actually host our first conference, face-to-face conference, in October of this year, and it was a success. To keep communicating what we do and the good work that we do internally with North Wales Police, to keep ensuring that they're familiar with what we do and how to access us. Building on the good foundation, to expand the programme with more complex cases. Yes, we had 90% of drugs possession cases, but we would like more cases that stretch our legs effectively in terms of the skill set and the training that we've had. We want to create an alcohol education programme, and I'm pleased to say that that is on track, that will mirror the drug education programme. And the drug education programme is actually going to be improved in the sense that since the beginning of the programme, there are things that we've learnt along the way, of which you can't put all drug users into one room. So we are splitting the drug education programme to heroin and crack cocaine use, and then every other class of substance in a separate group. And then we can tailor it more to their individual needs and to local needs. And from April onwards, we will be retaining females within Checkpoint. So speaking of females, we were lucky enough to be involved in the psychology-led model that sits under the Women's Justice Blueprint. And the feedback that we had was very positive. Checkpoint was never designed to support women post-assessment because they were referred onward to the Women's Pathfinder. However, in terms of what we did do, it was positive response in the sense that the team were all trained and skilled appropriately to work with the females. We aligned to the gender and trauma informed policies. The work that we need to do moving forward to give females the same level of support as we do currently the men is to ensure that the needs assessment is specific to females, making sure that our language is appropriate for females, making sure that the literature that we have is specific for them, ensuring that we have environments which are comfortable, that will make women feel at ease. Of course, as per the Corsten report, women's criminogenic needs differ to those of men, and it is important that that is recognised. And as such, we are delighted that we will be offering a gender-specific support for females moving forward. The navigators have a wealth of skills and expertise from working with females, from domestic abuse to many other aspects. So we are pleased to be moving forward. Moving on to the next slide, some examples of some successful cases, good news stories, if you like, just to give you a flavour of what we do. So there was one chap living over in the east who was racking up hundreds and thousands of hours to emergency services. He was bedbound, he was very unwell, both physically and mentally, and the demand on North Wales Police, Welsh Ambulance and Fire was excessive. He was open to a variety of agencies, but he was deteriorating fast, abusive to anyone who was trying to help him, making unfounded allegations and threats to staff. He declined personal care, food and medical treatments, and as such would often lay in soiled bedding for days. He was volatile, aggressive and displayed signs of paranoid delusion. He was essentially vulnerable despite the offending. And in light of all that, we took on the case. He was deemed as having capacity, but one of the navigators wasn't satisfied that that was the case. And after much persuasion and pulling multidisciplinary meetings together with all the agencies involved, we managed to secure him an assessment that was looking at his cognitive assessment, so his ability to process information as opposed to the capacity side of things. And it turned out that there were issues there. And as a result of being able to push forward with this and bring agencies together, the individual was actually removed from the home and placed into treatment and is now doing very well. There is a statement here from the acting inspector of the area who simply wrote, "This is an excellent example of how the hard work and dedication of the checkpoint team has assisted partners and frontline officers in addressing demand. The individual's behaviour was extremely complex and unlikely to be addressed through the criminal justice process alone. The intervention of the checkpoint team highlighted the medical needs of the individual, which were prioritised, positively impacting on the individual's well-being. The team were able to positively work with partners to influence appropriate treatment, significantly reducing demand through a coordinated, pragmatic approach. I wish to thank the team wholeheartedly for their intervention, which has positively influenced reoffending and freed up police and partner resources to address localised priorities." So that was one case. Another case we had was a chap who came to us for criminal damage. On the surface, nothing particularly alarming to the criminal damage. However, having gleaned information from the system, there were some concerns around how he presented and his behaviour. On visiting the property, it would appear that he was operating a home of multiple occupancy and had families living in different rooms within the property. He was self-diagnosing as schizophrenic and was of huge concern to us, so much so that we pushed forward for him to be assessed through the community mental health team. And within a week, he was seen by a psychiatrist and was diagnosed as schizophrenic and was medicated accordingly to his needs. Now, this was an individual who could have posed a risk and a threat to the individuals, not only in his home, but nearby where he lived. But with the swift action and the astuteness of the team, he was identified as being a risk to many individuals, including himself. And he was very, very grateful for the intervention and the outcome, having been anti-police and anti anything to do with mental health support. A lot of people will tell you that there's nothing wrong with them, but it's how you deal with those individuals and get them into treatment is actually how eventually they acknowledge that there is an issue. The restorative justice case that we had recently was a 37-year-old female assaulting a 69-year-old female, and it was a section 47 assault. We undertook the restorative justice. Both females were brought together and they both agreed to take part. And at the end of the session, it was clear that there were underlying issues for both of them, which resulted in tempers fraying. But the pathways that we undertook with the case that we were working with were attitude, thinking and behaviour, alcohol and relationships. And the lady at the time was experiencing crisis. So we were able to fully support her along with the Women's Pathfinder and bring it to a satisfactory conclusion for all. In terms of feedback, I think that it's important to note the feedback from officers because they're the people who will sell it to colleagues and get the buy-in, if you like. So one officer wrote, recently I've had dealings with a female who had an alcohol addiction. Firstly, police engagement with her was due to her being intoxicated in public places, which was causing a demand for the local police force. But eventually it also led her to commit a crime. The female was eligible for checkpoint and I felt this would be a really good opportunity to support this female in relation to her alcoholism. A referral was made and checkpoint were really quick to react and get in touch with this female, getting her on board and arranging the meetings with her. Initially, the female was proving difficult to get hold of, but she was provided with a mobile phone to facilitate the communication. And once this was in place, she regularly attended her meetings. The female showed vast improvement over the weeks she was engaging with checkpoints, and even said herself that she really enjoyed the process and was feeling much better. She turned up to every meeting sober and was looking really well. She admitted to having a couple of days drinking during those weeks, but considering she was drinking heavily daily, this was a massive improvement. I can also happily state that she has had no dealings with the police since checkpoint. This is an excellent resource and thank you to all. Just to upset you, Don, just jumping back to the Anglesey case, sorry. Just to give you an overview, this was a case, somebody who was addicted to heroin who came onto our caseload, had a substance misuse support worker but wasn't engaging, and also had respiratory issues. We weren't getting through to him, so we teamed up with the local PCSO and we went to knock on the door to understand what was going on. The conversation went well, he agreed to engage and he did. After he engaged with us, he then also engaged the substance misuse worker because we worked collaboratively with them so that they could also be able to deliver a service to him as he clearly needed. And he was, as I say, medicated for the heroin and he was undertaking ongoing treatment, for his respiratory issues. So we've had many thank yous. Sorry, Don. We've had many thank yous over the period. And as I say, these are only a snapshot of the ones that we've had, but you will see from the screen, the help and guidance I received from Checkpoint helped me weed out a lot of issues that were causing me problems. Dwi eisiau stopio defnyddio rhag ofyn I mi golli fy mhlant, wedi siarad mwy yn y 3 wythnos diwethaf am bethau na dwi wedi wneud yn y 3 blynedd diwethaf. I wish to thank Ffion for all her help over the last few months, from where I was at the start of our meetings to where I am now, is a credit to Ffion for helping me see my true potential. Again, thank you. Thank you very much for all your help and support in the past few months. It's very much appreciated and has made a positive difference in my life. I really appreciated the support I have received from Checkpoint. It has given me an opportunity to talk about my depression and mental health. It's highlighted what human compassion looked like. And on that note, thank you very much.
First of all, Anne, thanks very much for that comprehensive input. Really enjoy that, and I was looking forward to that because I had a number of questions which you've actually gone out of your way to answer, which I'm very pleased about, to be honest with you. But so I'll just throw it open. Has anybody got any questions, please? Yes, Sianna.
Ie, diolch yn fawr iawn am yr adroddiad a mae'n canolnogol iawn bod chi'n yn amlwg yn rhoi cymorth ac yn newid bywyda nifer o bobl. Efo'r niferoedd, sgynnau'm syniad os di hynna'n nifer da neu nifer gwael, ond be fyswn ni yn licio holi ydy faint mwy o bobl sydd o bosib yn cael eu helpu gan gwasanaeth da chi'n ei rhoi. A dwi'n meddwl am rhaid pan mae pobl yn gwrthod cymryd rhan yn fo. Oes na llawer sydd yn gwrthod, a faint mwy bys chi'n medru helpu sa rheini yn ymateb yn mwy positif at y syniad o defnyddio'ch gwasanaeth chi.
Ie, na, mae hynna'n gwestiwn da. Fel fedrwch chi'n dychmygu, mae yna bobl sydd yn cael eu cyfeirio sydd ddim yn addas, sydd ddim yn gymwys i'r rhaglan, a mae yna rei eraill sydd yn penderfynu bod nhw ddim isio dewis cymryd rhan yn y rhaglan. Ac i fod yn deg, da ni wedi dweud bod o'n agorad i bobl o'r pwynt lle maen nhw'n dod ato ni, a wedyn mi fysa ni'n gorfodi nhw i aros hefo ni, fel bod nhw'n gweld y peth drwad os liciwch chi. O ran faint fwy o bobl fedra ni weld, dwi'n meddwl bod hynny yn holl ddibynnol ar yr heddlu, i ddweud y gwir, ond mae hynna hefyd yn golygu bod rhaid i ni fatha'r rhaglen neu siŵr bod ni'n hysbysebu yn dda, bod ni yn cyfathrebu hefo swyddogion yn dda, a bod ni'n neud siŵr bod pobl yn gweld y gwaith da sy'n cael ei wneud ac yn gweld y niferoedd fel bod nhw yn dallt beth ydy'r gwerth a'r modd o'r rhaglen, a hefyd i'r swyddogion fel bod nhw yn medru dallt faint mor hawdd ydy'r broses, a gymaint o waith sydd gynnon nhw. Os fydda ni gymeryd rhywfaint o'r baich yna i ffwrdd, fel bod nhw'n medru canolbwyntio ar troseddau lot mwy difrifol na beth da ni'n delio fo, felly i'r gorau. Ac enwedig efo'r gŵr drosodd oedd yn ffonio fyny a dipyn go lew. Wrth iddo fo fod yn defnyddio amser yr heddlu, oedd o'n stopio bobl oedd efo anghenion eraill cael drwad i'r heddlu, neu at y gwasanaeth tân, neu at y pobl ambiwlans. Felly mae yna elfen arall iddi hefyd bod ni hefyd yn helpu pobl eraill sydd ddim byd i wneud efo nhw, os liciwch chi. Ond mae yna ddigon o sgop, dwi'n meddwl, o fewn beth da ni'n wneud i fedru helpu mwy o bobl. Croeso.
Well, I'd just like to thank the speaker for the delivery today. It's been really encouraging and very worthwhile to hear the results of this. I think when this was first mooted, I think several of us thought, is this an easy way out really for people to escape the full force of the law, as it were? Not having, obviously, notwithstanding the fact that very often people who do go to court and are sentenced with fines or imprisonment and so on turn out to be no better at the end of the day, and it doesn't really have much effect on them. And but we were willing to go along with this and give it a good try. And it's very encouraging to hear the results. They're very, very encouraging. The percentages of people who've succeeded in coming out of this in a beneficial way. And again, I think at the time we assumed, or some of us assumed, perhaps it'd be mainly young people. But of course, we refer to the 60+ gentleman who was a sort of pest of the police force and other emergency services. And obviously, it's not just young people that's involved in this. And again, that's very encouraging too, that it's been used in those particular cases as well. I was just wondering in terms of the figures where UK, where sort of 73%, I think with the 73.4% in terms of drugs possession cases were did not offend again, but I think there was 22%, I think, were further charged, as it were, but that didn't result in actual charges being made, I think. There's a comment. I'm just wondering what happens to those. I think only 1.9% went on to be charged. Is that the failures of the CPS, or are there other particular factors involved in that which are not apparent?
Yep, absolutely, and it's a good question. I think that there's obviously many aspects as to why somebody isn't charged with something. It could be that they're innocent, that they've not actually participated in any criminality. There are times where people can make malicious accusations that are unfounded. And there are times where the evidence threshold isn't met, but the police officers in the room can probably better comment on that than myself.
Thank you.
Hi Anna, diolch fawr. Just a couple of simple questions, I hope. How do you define low-level hate crime? That's the first question. And you mentioned giving an example of positive contributions. Can you give us an example what you meant by that?
So the low-level hate crime, when we have the discussions with CPS, what they're looking to see is whether there is a pattern in the offending. Is it something that they've done before? Has it been going on for some time with the individual? Is it something that the CPS are likely to want charged? So low level would be perhaps an off-the-cuff remark that's the intention wasn't there to be malicious per se. It could be a rant in public with no specific victim behind it, a named individual, if you like. And I think that, you know, it's important that the CPS looks at these, because when you speak to stakeholders and victims, what they want is for people to be educated, not sent to court and maybe fined. They want people to understand the impact it has on them, so that they don't do it again to either them or to somebody else. And a lot of the time, education is the bit that's missing. And, you know, acceptable behaviour towards our fellow people in community. So that's the low level aspect of it, but it would need an inspector's approval. We don't take anything lightly. We call it low level hate crime. I'm pretty sure the individual at the receiving end doesn't think it's low level. And it's about how we communicate that. We must get the victim's perspective on it and their wishes, although they don't have the final say as to whether it would come to checkpoint or not. But we are very victim focused, and we need to make sure that their wishes are taken into account as much as we possibly can.
That's the comment you made there is what I wanted to hear. Then the other one was the example of positive contribution. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, a positive contribution in itself is obviously to stop victimizing people, to cease the offending. If you're living a pro-social lifestyle, then you are making a positive contribution. If you can be one less person in the cycle of crime, then it's a positive contribution. If you can then find work, it's a positive contribution. And if your children are no longer under the radar of social services because you're addressing your behaviour, then it's a positive contribution. And one of the things that we really must look to do is try and break the cycle of multi-generational offending that stem from trauma and the adverse childhood experiences.
That's right. So it's breaking the link, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Only takes one link to break. Diolch fawr iawn.
Croeso.
Thank you, Anne, for that. When I first started looking at this, I've obviously read somewhere in terms of eligibility, it appears that an offender makes a no reply interview or denies the offence, then providing that CPS charging standards are met, they are still eligible. But in the beginning, now you said that's not the case. Has that changed, or have I got that wrong from somewhere?
I think that may very well have been part of the original concept, picking up from other diversion programs. But I think in order to have that foundation and that starting point with an individual, you really do need that admission of guilt.
Yeah, that was my main concern, to be perfectly honest with you. Just one other question, if I may. You said the content of what is actually, I don't need to run through everything that in the content of the classroom-based drugs education program, but who delivers it and what exactly is the content or part of the content?
So it's delivered by the navigators themselves, and the content seeks to address the thinking behind the drug use. So it's quite simplistic, and sometimes the simpler things are the better things, to be honest. So we look at the cycle of change, which is something that's widely recognised and used within cognitive behavioural theory. So we look at the cycle of change to understand where a person is at that point entering our service in terms of their drug use. We then need to understand and we unpick and elicit information around what their thoughts and feelings are at the time, what triggers the drug use, who are they with, where are they, is there an event? So in a group setting, people will start to offload. Well, actually, I started smoking cannabis at the age of because of, or every time I go to a barbecue and I have a pint and maybe a few more pints, actually the friends bring out the cocaine and I have a line of coke. So it's about getting people to be comfortable in a controlled environment to be able to discuss what leads them to that point. Once we've got that sorted and established, it's then very much focused on harm reduction. So we don't preach to anyone thou must not take drugs, but a lot of people are not entirely aware of the implications and the consequences of what a drugs conviction would entail. So many educational establishments have a zero tolerance towards drugs, and they could be throwing their career completely out the window by being involved in that lifestyle. So it's about educating and harm reduction being the key thing, because obviously, as we're aware, with one of the highest rates of drug-related deaths in the UK, it is important that we try and have that early intervention approach so that we can better improve on those statistics.
Just a final one, really. You said that most of the offences that you dealt with up to now are drugs-related offences, and you're hoping to move over to include a lot more other offences. What would you say would be the ideal split? Would it be 50-50 drugs and other offences, or?
Personally, I don't think it's about having a split or a number applied to anything. For me, whether it's drugs possession or it's child neglect or child assault or possession of an offensive weapon, if we can get that person into a better place, that's my focus. What the offence is, it's not that it's irrelevant because it's what's brought them to us, but for us, it's about understanding the rationale behind what they're doing. So yes, drugs is obviously prevalent, as is polydrug use. But for me, it's more about addressing the needs rather than the offence.
Thanks so much. Anybody, any further questions at all? No? Okay. I've just got one more and that's it. I promise you. It's just, how many other forces are doing something similar?
There are several forces within the UK who are opting for diversion. I'm fortunate enough to be sat in a forum at the moment looking at upcoming changes, legislation to the out of court disposal world. And it's actually quite surprising how many forces out there are delivering deferred prosecution and diversion schemes. And the appetite is growing significantly throughout the UK.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I really enjoyed it. I had a lot of questions there and you've answered them all, to be fair. And Councillor Bithell and myself, I think, would probably of similar mind with some of the things, and you've answered everything. And I just wish you well in the future.
Thank you very much.
Scheme. I think it's well worthwhile. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Right, if we move on now, please, to the item 8A, which is a periodic update by the North Wales Police and Crime Commissioner.
Bear with me a moment, so just. Yeah, diolch, Chair. That's different. Yeah. I don't know what's happened with something's gone on with the IT on my side, so I do apologise there, Chair. So yeah, so it's my report to panel for the period from 1st of September to the 1st of November of this year. The report provides the panel with an overview of the decisions which they have made and other scrutiny activities and actions that I've taken over the term of the report. Panel members will be aware that my first police and crime plan was published in the autumn of 2021. My plan sets out my vision for North Wales, namely that North Wales communities are safe, victims and vulnerable people feel supported, crime and reoffending are low, and people have confidence in policing and the criminal justice system. My vision is underpinned by 3 police and crime priorities and a number of associated objectives as follows. Delivering safer neighbourhoods. So underneath that is tackling and preventing rural and wildlife crime. Improve the efficiency and effectiveness of police officers and police staff. Improve road safety. Going on to supporting victims and communities. We aim to be tackling and preventing domestic abuse and sexual violence. Safeguarding vulnerable people, including children. Tackle and prevent cybercrime. Establish a victims panel. And tackle and prevent hate crime. And finally, the third priority is a fair and effective criminal justice system. Introduce a North Wales female offender strategy, which is now the North Wales, the Women's in Justice strategy. Increase the use of restorative justice. Support and protect children and young people and divert them away from the criminal justice system. And address the root causes of offending and support the rehabilitation of people who have offended. There are a number of ways in which I monitor the force's performance against the police and crime priorities and the national measures set out by UK government. The primary way in which I hold the Chief Constable to account is at my Strategic Executive Board meetings. I receive a comprehensive performance report by North Wales Police at these quarterly meetings, and I also conduct a deep dive of one of the priorities as listed above at each SEB meeting. In addition to the SEB performance report, my team and I also receive numerous quarterly performance bulletins, and they again are linked to one of the priorities, and that provides additional context to the main performance report, as well as weekly performance overview by chief officers. At the most recent SEB meeting on the 26th of October, we conducted a deep dive of serious and organised crime, as well as equality, diversity and inclusion. And there's a table there, which I'm sure that's included in the pack. It should be. The whole report's included in the pack, so just refer to that. As you can see there, homicides have reduced in the rolling 12 months, showing parity with the 2019 baseline. Firearms discharges show a change to a reduction against the baseline of 6% and larger reduction against recent periods. Firearms offences in North Wales are largely non-serious weapons. North Wales is far below national averages. Knives. NHS data for force areas has become available on the Home Office DCPP portal. It currently shows 0 under 25 NHS injury admissions in the most recent 12 months, with 10 in the previous 12 months. There have been no admissions since February 2022, with data being up to May 2022. North Wales Police dedicate research analysis resources to identify and flag serious organised crime perpetrators, victims and cuckooed addresses. A SOC intel team monitor and develop the intelligence relating to serious and organised crime, in particular county lines, criminal exploitation, modern slavery, human trafficking. Daily tasking meetings are held between departments to share information on emerging threats, and a monthly county lines intelligence profile is circulated to all response units and neighbourhood policing teams to ensure that current threats remain visible. The force's tactical tasking and coordination groups identify the highest risk across North Wales. The method used by these groups allows for appropriate resources to be allocated and for requests to be submitted to the regional organised crime unit when required. You know, and I'm just going on there. I'm just conscious of time as well, Chair. Saving me going through it just to save a bit of time. Happy to take any questions that panel members may have. But as I said, I could talk all day about it, couldn't I, really? Thank you, Chair.
Does anybody have any questions at all for the Commissioner? Yes, sir. Councillor Bailey.
I've got a few, if I may, Chair. First of all, the Commissioner just mentioned the page 3, the table there on the national police crimes and so on, which are highlighted there. And it mentions firearms specifically, doesn't mention knives, although knives are referred to in the next one paragraph. I was just wondering why, knives are not there in the National Crime and Policing Measures table, as it were, because again, from all reports, this is about more widespread crime of national concern, really, where people particularly are carrying knives, sometimes allegedly for their own protection, but of course are using them as well. I'm just wondering why that is the case. That's my first question. And I'd just like to comment really on page 4, where reference is made there to the number of cases which have been brought to court now with organised crime gangs, particularly in the drugs business. And again, the actual sentences that are being issued. So I'd like to sort of congratulate North Wales Police, obviously, through you, Commissioner, for the work that they're doing in this. We're seeing that these particular criminals are being caught, and they are being brought before the court. And it's also very pleasing to see the court issuing sentences which are appropriate and fitting. Because in the past, I think people must be quite frustrated with the police to go through all the work they do in getting these cases to court and seeing some derisory sentences, a slap over the wrist in many cases, because most people would regard as very serious offences. And the actual sentences are being issued now are rather eye-watering in comparison with those that were happening in the past, and that's very, very welcome again. It seems the criminal justice system is now working more cooperatively and actually having an effect, so that's very welcome. Later in the report, you mentioned, I'm going on now to another issue you mentioned in one of your previous reports, Commissioner, regarding return home interviews after children have gone missing from home. And I think you mentioned the fact that very often these particular interviews are not occurring in North Wales, and that alarmed me somewhat as a member of the Flintshire County Council, and I raised it with our chief officer. He investigated, came back to me and said, I think it's well over 80% actually are involved in those interviews. So that's working in Flintshire. They can't actually force the young people to undergo the interview, but every encouragement is made to get them to participate in that. So it would seem that the general comment there is a cover really, but the system I think is probably patchier than perhaps the figures and the statements gives rise to, in that particular sense. I think certainly our authority, I think, are doing their very best. I've pursued that on your behalf, and it is important that they do undergo those interviews, because we need to know why children are running away from home and so on, and hopefully then those particular issues can be resolved satisfactorily. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Diolch, Councillor Bithell, and thank you very much for your very positive comments towards North Wales Police, and I'm pleased that, and I know that the Chief Constable will pass them on certainly to the rest of the force. So thank you very much for those comments. It's always nice to hear them. Regarding the first question, I think that would be regarding the it's like the national data set that's been set out, so we don't have much control over that, as I understand it, and I'm sure Wayne or the Chief Constable could just confirm that. But that's my understanding of it. Just going to the last point you made, Councillor Bithell, regarding return home interviews. I know that there are a number of local authorities who perform really well at this. Unfortunately, there's some who are quite not hitting that mark, and I know it's something that it does concern me, and Councillor Bithell knows me too well, and my involvement when I was a kinship carer and the importance of having return home interviews. So it's very much on our radar, and we're looking to be working with each of the local authority leads And indeed, there has been quite a number of meetings now, and we have there's a dedicated officer from North Wales Police linking in with the relevant people in each local authority area. So that's work that's being progressed through. But I would like to see an improvement in that. And maybe there's learning from each local authorities and supporting each other to overcome that as well. And I'm a big advocate of that collaborative approach and seeing and sharing best practices that we can all benefit. And in particular, it'll be the children who are going to benefit from this, aren't they, in the longer term. So I hope that addresses the questions you had, Councillor Bithell.
Nigel?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report, Commissioner. I'm looking at the statistics regarding domestic abuse. Quite concerning. It says that they're 20.2% higher than pre-COVID, 11.5% higher than the previous 12 months as well. So a few questions really. How do we in North Wales compare to the national average? I understand that there is an increase across the board, but how do we compare nationally? And looking also at, I know we do have a few things we put in place now, domestic abuse performance improvement plan, but it also does say as well that there's an increase in repeat offenders for victims as well. So is the plan working, and do we have adequate resources for this sector, please?
Diolch, Councillor Williams, and some really good questions there. And we always know of how much of a priority violence against women and girls is to each of us here in the panel. And I know it is with my office, with the North Wales Police Force. Indeed, we've got both myself and the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner are white ribbon ambassadors as well. So very pertinent to us. I would say that because there's that awareness now, would contribute to that, and I don't think that's a bad place to be about increasing that awareness and what we can do to support people in coming forward to make sure that what they're experiencing is being dealt with by the police service. I was just going to pass over to Wayne because this probably links in quite nicely with the Women in Justice strategy as well, and some synergies there. So I'll just pass over to Wayne.
Yeah, I mean, the data, you can look at it, it is concerning because of the levels of domestic abuse. But one thing I think significantly for North Wales is the crime recording practices, which have been inspected before by the HMI CFRS, have stood up to the highest level of scrutiny. So I think people are confident coming forward to report domestic abuse. And that's good that we surface it then, because the commission service we've got to support domestic abuse victims is there and in place, and they're doing an excellent job. And there was a launch you would have seen in the press a few months ago where they'd taken on additional staff. And as Andy said as well, the violence against women and girls agenda is really important, but we must also remember that domestic abuse males can be victims as well, and we don't lose sight of that. But as the deep dives that we do with the Force at Strategic Executive Board, we've examined violence against women and girls twice this year already, and we will revisit it again in the new year, particularly things that are now becoming more and more eminent, things like stalking and harassment, and making sure that the Force's approach towards stalking and harassment, which we've seen big increases on, and coercive control is appropriate. So the whole violence against women and girls agenda, it does gather pace, and we do a significant amount of scrutiny on that about what the Force does. And although it is servicing more victims, those victims then get the appropriate support they can get, and where appropriate, offenders can be prosecuted as well.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. Just to go back on that, and so are we saying that the increase in domestic abuse, so the national average, are we booking the trend of that, or is it you just saying that our reporting mechanisms are better and people feel more comfortable to come forward, or are we actually seeing a larger than normal increase across the country?
I don't actually have the data to hand, so I couldn't tell you where we sit currently, because obviously the data changes. But I think the response that the Force has got in place, particularly through things like the improvement plan, does put the force well placed in the scrutiny we're applying to make sure they're doing everything they possibly can to raise the issue. And for the officers have got it at the forefront of the mind of when they're dealing with it and trying to find a solution, a long-term solution, and not adopting this problem solving approach as well, of not just trying to deal with one domestic incident that may occur, because we all know from all the available research, you know, there can be many, many instances of domestic abuse in a household before a victim will come forward to report it. So the force has also invested a lot of time in problem solving to try and get to the root causes of problems and not looking at individual individual instances, but looking at a more rounded solution for it. But your actual point about where the force sits, I don't have that data to hand ready right now. So it wouldn't be right for me to try and answer that one.
On Nigel's question, you know, I can speak with my sort of domestic abuse hat on. Really, we had about a 40% increase in the number of referrals for domestic abuse post-COVID, and that was expected, you know, because these women had been locked up, as it were, with the perpetrator for months on end, and couldn't actually get out to actually report it. So that was an anticipated increase, really, in the number of cases, and of course that particular situation where they've been in that incarcerated virtually in the house with the perpetrator, accelerated the incidents and the number of reporting which we expected. So I think we have to bear that in mind too. There was a lull because the cases weren't being reported, and after the restrictions were lifted, you know, the report came in. So, you know, you're quite right. Obviously, the reporting mechanism is working far more effectively nowadays. So you know, but that's certainly a factor we need to bear in mind in terms of the upward trend.
Diolch. Just really come in on that, and some of you may have picked up on the Domestic Abuse Commissioner visiting Wrexham, where myself and the Chief Constable were there to attend a meeting, and from herself, she was commenting on how good the level of service that we're getting in North Wales is really, really high. It's very impressed with what we're doing as a police force, but also the commission services that we provide as well. And I think that came through with the Auth One conference we had as well. The first time we've had a conference regarding domestic abuse and modern slavery as well. And that's landed really well with the partners that we work with. Got a really lot of good coverage there, and I also received a letter from the Aberconwy MS as well, congratulating on the work that, you know, in particular Matthew, head of comms and engagement, in organising the event. So, despite the concerning data coming through, but I think the important thing is that we recognise the service that we are providing and the mechanisms that are in place are really serving North Wales well. And when we're getting comments like that, especially from the Domestic Abuse Commissioner, really puts us in a really strong place nationally. Thank you.
Councillor Emery.
I've got a question which isn't really a lot to do with policing. It's around the regional strategic partnership review. Perhaps these boards have got different names because I've never heard of some of them. The Regional Leadership Board, is that the 6 leaders and the 6 chief execs that sit on it? What is the Regional Leadership Board?
So, yeah, so the 6 local authority chief execs, leaders, chief constable, PCC, chief exec and chair of the health board, chief fire officer, the snow zone authorities on it as well.
Okay, so it's the same. Okay, same one I'm thinking of. So now we've got a new North Wales Strategic Partnership Board. What's that? Staffing. A decision was made at the Regional Leadership Board that Business and Administration report was required for the new North Wales Strategic Partnership Board.
So there's a Safe North Wales Partnership Board that sits underneath it. Then there's others, so we've got the planning board, there's the vulnerability exploitation board, there's the concept and prevent board. So that resource that can refer to support all of those. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So there's a new. Okay. So it's nothing to do with I haven't heard of North Wales Social Care and Wellbeing Improvement Collaborative. Is that like the regional partnership board? No. I've never heard of these things. And what about the corporate joint committees? That's nothing to do
Chair,
with anything.
just to try and give more assurances in that, how about we take from the meeting a structure of how which organisation, which partners that we work with, and how that looks within the organisation
Yeah, that
from
would be
from
good.
that North Wales
Yeah.
regional perspective. And I think that'll be beneficial, especially newer members as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, because
Yeah.
some of them I would have thought I would have known about in my council head on, but I've never heard of some of these.
Yeah, happy to take that as an action from
Yeah, great.
from
Like
today.
a
Yeah, like an
something-
organisational chat would be
Yeah, that's fine. Just by email's fine.
great. Thank you.
I quite find the reference in the report, but I think it was 140 cases of stalking that the police have been dealing with. I believe new legislation is going to be introduced. I think it's a private members bill really in terms of stalking. To what extent is there a feeling amongst the police that more strength in law is required in dealing with these particular cases as and when they arise?
So hopefully that's on. Thank you. So I suppose it refers back to the last point about domestic abuse increases. And, I suppose what I'd say is we are pretty good in North Wales. When somebody does come forward to report a matter to us, we spend a lot of time with that individual going back through what's happened, because we know that the first time somebody will report something to us, actually the incidents have been going on for some years, and we record every incident that happens, which is why we end up with higher recording levels, because we're doing the right thing by the Home Office counting rules and by the legislation that's set out to make sure that we've got a true picture of that individual's offending behaviour. So we stand an opportunity of being able to break that cycle of abuse, get the perpetrator into the right place in terms of, getting that behaviour to stop so they don't just move on to another victim, and also protecting that victim from further issue. Stalking and harassment will make up some of those offences that we see coming out. And I suppose what I would say is with the introduction of any new piece of legislation comes additional reporting. So we're likely to see, as we get new legislation coming in, increases yet further still around the amount that people are reporting and we're recording, and also seeking to deal with individuals. So it's always good to have the legislation to be able to deal with particularly stalking and harassment behaviour, because it's quite complex. We're doing quite a lot of work at the moment as part of the Violence Against Women and Girls network across Wales to understand that, with some important work, academic work that's been researched about the behaviour of offenders who perpetuate their crimes around stalking and harassment, and the type of devastation that brings to victims. So we want to understand that before jumping forward in relation to additional legislation, because actually the legislation we've got and the prevention orders that we've got access to, I think are adequate, but we need people to come forward to report it, to have the confidence to stay with that report, and to allow us to be able to bring those offenders to justice with the legislation that we've got. Sorry, that's quite a long-winded way of answering the question, but I'm hopeful that it ties in with the previous point around domestic abuse and whether or not we're an outlier. As far as I've seen to this point, we aren't an outlier in relation to our most similar family, but it's something that we're keeping a very close eye on. And what I would be wanting to do more than anything is get a true report of the crime that is happening out there, and challenge others to perhaps make sure that they've got those reporting practices 100% right, so that we're actually offering the service to the victims that need that opportunity to be able to break free from abuse that they've been suffering with for many years.
Before I ask for a proposal and a seconder for the periodic update, I'd just like to thank Chief Constable for those remarks, but also say I'm conscious there's nothing on the agenda where you can actually say anything that you wish to say. But as a fact that you're here, is there anything that you would like to say at this point?
No, thank you very much. I had the opportunity to come to the police and crime panel in a slightly different guise as I was waiting to see whether or not I was going to be approved. So it was a slightly more nervous meeting for me, but it is a real great opportunity to be here. So thank you very much. And you know, obviously, I'm 5-6 weeks now into my time here at North Wales, really enjoying it. There's some fantastic work going on, and hopefully we all have the opportunity to see that by the Commissioner's scrutiny of us, with a lot going on now on the lead up to Christmas. Very busy time for our officers, and incredibly impressed with the dedication and professionalism that I'm seeing across the board to delivering for our communities. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, Pat's just reminded me really. I mean, did you thank the staff who contributed to the familiarisation day that we had last week? I can pronounce it properly. Familiarisation.
Yeah, can't spell it.
I can't spell it either, but there we are.
We all had a very
Yeah. Poser for the periodic update. Okay, and the seconder. Okay. Okay, thanks very much. Thank you. Now moving on to item 8B, which is an update on the 2022-2023 budget, and it's Kate Jackson who's taking this item. Kate, the floor is yours.
I'm going to assume everybody's had the opportunity to read the panel report. The 2021-22 accounts and audit, I'm really pleased that we've once again received an unqualified audit opinion, and I'd like to express my thanks and appreciation to the Forces Finance team who worked. Okay. I'd like to express my thanks and appreciation to the Forces Finance team who worked hard to prepare the accounts on time and to a high standard as always, and also to Audit Wales who completed their work in line with the revised timetable, and to our Joint Audit Committee for their oversight. The Auditor General issued the notice of certification of completion of the audit on the 29th of November. When we receive the annual audit letter, which we're expecting imminently, this will complete the cycle for 2021-22. The statement of accounts are published on our website together with an introduction to the accounts and an easy read version also. This year's budget update, we're anticipating an underspend this year, and much of this can be attributed to Operation Uplift. The budget for the additional officers was built in from the 1st of April 2022, and it's currently anticipated that the uplift target will be achieved during March 2023. Because of the expectation that officer numbers will need to be maintained during the CSR period, it's anticipated that the underspend position will not continue into the next financial year. As you might expect, energy and fuel costs are higher than budgeted, which is down to higher prices. Capital work's been undertaken to reprofile the capital budget, and this continues on an ongoing basis. There's a need to balance a number of factors with this. There are operational requirements to maintain, improve and or replace estates, vehicles and IT, and the force will not perform well unless it has the infrastructure in place to support it. But the programme does need to be deliverable. We have had a tendency to profile the budgets optimistically in terms of timescales. And that's good, it's prudent, it ensures we plan to have the resources available as soon as they're required, but it does mean those resources can't be used for anything else pending the capital expenditure. We need to prioritise the capital programme to ensure it can be delivered. Affordability is an increasing risk in the capital programme. That's down to high inflation generally, and also a tight labour market, which means we're competing for builders. I think I'm the fourth person to mention the familiarisation event last week, so I won't go into it again. Joint Audit Committee met on the 8th of December. Meeting papers are available on our website. And I would just mention the open session of Joint Audit Committee meetings are held in public. So anyone who wishes to attend, if they contact the OPCC, and they'll be given the information to do so. Future planning, the work to prepare the budget for 2023-2024 and the accompanying MTFP is well underway. We're still working on assumptions about overall funding until we receive the provisional settlement. So we aren't in a position to estimate council tax increase at this point. However, based on indications so far and knowing where inflation is especially high, we anticipate that the increase per the last MTFP would leave a funding gap, which we're working hard to close. The Commissioner's budget proposal for 2023-2024 will be presented to Police and Crime Panel on Monday the 30th of January. There is a survey on our website and paper copies are available in libraries and some other buildings, which includes a question on our funding. Looking even further forward, the funding formula review, the Minister of State for Crime, Policing and Fire has confirmed a renewed commitment to continue a funding formula review and has asked the Home Office officials to prepare for a first public consultation to take place in early 2023. Are there any questions?
Thank you. It was just actually something that was flagged up at our famous meeting last week, and that was to do with efficiencies or cost efficiency were mentioned. And in that phraseology, some great cost efficiencies. And then a second question was asked about, well, how have we done that? And were they subject to any sort of a cut? Are we saving money by not doing things in simple terms? So my question, and maybe not, you can't answer it today or now, but hopefully soon, would be, indeed, if there are reductions in financial reductions, are they linked to any reduction in a service or a provision that we could actually clarify, see, and therefore we could all understand? Big question.
That is a big question. I did mention last week that we do priority resource planning, and part of that is identifying where we have the capacity maybe to do a little bit less in some areas. So we do want to continue to provide the service that we need to provide, but some ways of doing things become less necessary as new methods come along or as new priorities come along. So yes and no, there will be cuts, but that doesn't necessarily affect the service that we wish to deliver to the public.
Okay, just to further, I understand because it evolves and you might have better technology, do it cheaper. But I personally, this is a request actually, I'd still like to understand that evolution so that I can see and test out your logic to make sure it's appropriate for the public. If that could be done.
Yeah, we will bring that as part of the presentation at the end of next month.
Perfect. Thank you very much indeed.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. It's good to have that challenge. I think this is really healthy. I think what would be useful as well, especially for newly elected members of the panel, is that over the last 10 years, there's been at least £35 million worth of savings made. Savings, cuts, whatever it is, there's been around that amount. And I think it's just quite appropriate just to bring it to this arena now, before we present to you when it comes to the precept, setting the precept, that you have a real significant say on that, as well as members of the public. And we are listening to what's being said there, just to put that back. And I just think it's be useful for you to know. Thank you.
Again, I'm really showing my new member colours today in the process of setting the council tax precept. So the meeting's 30th of January. We will find out what you're thinking in the precept, a week before, 10 days before, whenever it's announced. That'll be the first time that we will hear what the percentage figure is. Is that correct? 10 days before the 30th of Jan, something like that. So is that right? Ish?
That is when we will publish that data, yes.
Okay. So when we come to those discussions, and again, it's working out how much power we have. I mean, obviously, you probably don't know, but the Fire Authority have put in quite a large council precept, which has gone down very badly with council leaders and will be rejected this afternoon. So we don't want to be in that position so late in the game, do we? Does that ever happen?
Not here. It has happened elsewhere.
Right.
And it has happened 3 times in Wales in my tenure in this role.
Okay, because obviously 10 days before the 30th of Jan doesn't give us a lot of, if you came back and said, hey, let's go for 13%, how would that work out if we went, well, we don't think that's appropriate? How's it work?
There is a process to deal with that, if the panel vetoed it,
Yes.
then there is a process to come back so
there's
many days
time to
later.
come back.
There is a second meeting built into the diaries already in
Right,
early
okay.
February.
Okay. Yeah.
Just to come back and supporting what Kate's saying there, because we had that familiarisation last week. I think there was quite a few things in there which would indicate which sort of direction the travel will be going,
Yeah.
as well as the consultation, the public consultation that's currently been launched now out live, and that's been, you know, I don't know what the figures are at the moment, but we're certainly exceeding even in just over a week what was done in the 6 weeks consultation last year, and we've surpassed that already. So we have a really strong engagement from members of the public as well. So, but those sort of things will give you an indication which sort of direction we're looking towards.
Okay.
If that helps.
But there's time to.
Yeah, of course it is.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Do you have any further questions yourself? Yes.
Few questions if I may, Chair. On page 36, it mentions under 4.4 Operation Uplift, the 20,000 additional officers nationally. Is that really an uplift, or is it a restoration of what we had way back in 2010? You know, because I think we've lost about 20,000 officers. The reports I've seen elsewhere are accurate. We lost 20,000 officers, not in North Wales, of course, but nationally. And obviously the government have tried to supplement those now to ensure that we get back to where we were. So that's the first question. And on page 37, mention is made there of additional money coming in, and it mentions PCSOs. Does that money still come from Welsh Government as opposed to the Home Office? Just have clarification on that, please. Thank you.
Kate, I think you want to say that question.
Yeah, I can't answer nationally about the 20,000 officers, but the 206 officers that North Wales Police is gaining from Operation Uplift would take us above the level that we had previously in 2010. And PCSOs, that does come from Welsh Government. Going back to Operation Uplift, we actually exceeded our numbers. Was it May this year? Yeah, May this year we got back to our 2010 levels.
Reference to that again, you know, I think in the past when we've had the additional police officers allocated to us, or we've been able to afford them, not all of those will actually appear on the street, as it were. I mean, the public perhaps quite pleased to see that, but you know, in many cases the officers will be employed behind the scenes, as where, you know, cybercrime was mentioned in your report, and again we made reference to this, didn't we, last week, in terms of our concerns about that. Now that they'll be working in back rooms, as it were, in dealing with those particular issues, not on the street, as it were. So there's not going to be a higher profile probably on our streets in terms of seeing police officers out and about, but nevertheless they're fighting crime and the new crimes that we are having to deal with in this generation.
Diolch, Councillor Bithell. And you know, neighbourhood policing is at the heart of my policing crime plan, and I know you'll be aware of it, and I know new members will be aware of that as well. And certainly the Chief Constable is aware of that, and that formed part of what we went through regarding the recruitment process as well. Because that visibility and how things look and all the things that we're told as elected members translated and form part of that recruitment process in appointing the new Chief Constable as well. And on that, I think it'd be quite interested to bring Amanda in as well, just to touch on it and give her experience of how strong that case was put forward through that process as well. I think it'd be quite useful to provide the members with that information.
Thank you, Diolch. Thank you. So the visibility factor is really important to communities, and certainly since I've started, I've had meetings with members of the community, with the Commissioner, and we've spoken directly about that and our planning around it in order to make sure that we are in a position where the public are able to see us, access us, have that conversation with us. We're also very much aware of the fact that the way people live their lives is very different as well. Some people live that online, so we've got to be visible in lots of different ways. And we know that there is offending that happens behind the scenes as well, in more of a cyber environment. We also, from our uplift, the numbers for uplift, part of that has been a contribution that's been nationally agreed with the Home Office to our regional organised crime units. So, some of that additionality has already been filtered out into areas that are very important to us in terms of eradicating county lines, dealing with modern day slavery, dealing with the exploitation that we see in all those areas. The PCSO position in terms of Wales is a good position to be in, because you're absolutely right. We are funded in relation to PCSOs to a certain number by Welsh Government, but that grant comes with conditions, and that is match funding. So it has to be that we have an equal amount that are employed locally by us to match the funding that is given by Welsh Government. And in fact, I meet with Welsh Government to go through that and to understand the plans to get us to that amount, because if we don't reach that, we're capped in relation to that grant. And obviously the PCSO visibility is really important in our communities from the point of view of having and being the eyes and the ears of the community, but gathering the intelligence and working closely with us in terms of the crime fighting part of the business to make sure that we've got that prevention agenda very firmly set. So, I've already started in terms of the Chief Constable's delivery plan that very much is aligned to the police and crime plan to make sure that we are tackling the heart of our business, which is the unique role of policing in our communities, being visible, doing the prevention work, and making sure that we're tackling the things that the public shouldn't have to put up with. That's very much at the heart of what I'm trying to deliver here in North Wales. Thank you.
Just to come back on that as well, Councillor Bithell, we don't want our rural communities feeling as though they're left out on their own either. And it was meant to be. We've seen the NFU and FUW quite recently, only down the road in Conway Business Centre there. We can understand and we recognise the importance of visibility, not just in our more urbanised areas, but our rural communities as well play a significant part of that as well. And I just wouldn't want any members here or members of the public feeling as though that they're forgotten about. Certainly not. Everybody is in the heart of our plan and what we can do to provide the best possible police service for North Wales.
Could I please ask you on about rural areas getting left out? In South Meirion, especially in Tywyn Aberdawi area, we do feel left out. We see a police officer maybe once a month, if you're lucky. And this is me going on now for a couple of years. The people of town would love to see the police back on the beat. We have one police officer, I believe, who goes on when he signs on, he has to go 20 odd miles to Dolgelly and then come back to Tywyn. We very rarely see the police presence in Tywyn, Aberdawi, Brincree, Llanagrin, and we would love to have some more officers there on a more regular basis. Thank you.
Yeah, Diolch. I think it really just encapsulates what I've just said there about how important it is for our rural communities. I don't want them feeling like that, feeling left out like that. But so I'm glad that you've raised it here. But there's also we've introduced this year alone. We've introduced the engagement van, rural crime team, and now we're just starting that process of where they're wanting their own engagement vehicle as well to address those issues that you've brought to mind. And myself and the Chief Constable have had those conversations. There's other things that we're looking into as well, and like the use of technology and how that can be used to its optimum in supporting our rural communities as well. And that's not to dismiss what like your traditional Bobby on the beat, so to speak, but it's a bit about being more creative, a bit more innovative, and using the resources that we've got to the best possible solutions. And it might not be that we'd be able to have a police station in every town and in every village across North Wales. And as much as it would be lovely to have, there's the practical implication of that would be very, very low. And it wouldn't be, I don't think it'd be fair to set that sort of level of expectation to the people of North Wales. But it doesn't mean to say that we can't have conversations with other community groups, and maybe having, we know that we have Paned with the PCSO. There's other things similar to that about having those sort of engagement events, and I'd rather be working with you to try and address these sort of problems. And you'll know better than me on what would work in your area, and perhaps we can pick that up after the meeting here today.
What we do see a lot of is boy-girl races around the town, various times of the night, and the possibility of there's a big drug problem, and cars are meeting together in certain places at night. The locals know where they are. I've reported it myself many times. I don't know if there's any convictions or anything happened from there, but it is a big problem in rural areas.
Thank you for that. Sorry. I'm sorry, Chief Counsellor, sorry.
So it's just to fully acknowledge what you're saying, to be very clear that one of the key pieces of work that I've got starting in the next week or so is to review exactly what we've got where across North Wales, to make sure that we've got the right resources in the right places, and that we're not having a position where officers are having to spend their duty time travelling backwards and forwards to collect kit and to collect equipment, and that we're also being responsive to our communities. If you're reporting something and you're not getting a response in relation to that, then the very least I would expect is an explanation, so that you know exactly what the situation is, because that needs to be tackled. So I'll take that away to personally look at it, but at the same time, just to give you the reassurance that we are reviewing exactly what we've got where, and that we make sure that we are able to operate to today's problems, and do that with fleet of foot, really.
Thank you for that.
Do we have any further specific questions on the budget, please? Can I have a proposer? And seconder? Thank you. Thank you very much. And can I ask members to show their hands to note the report? Thank you very much. Moving on to item 9A, summary of complaints received against the Police and Crime Commissioner, September 2021, September 2022. And it's Dawn who's taking this out.
Thank you. So the summary of complaints received between September last year and this year is on pages 43 to 46 of your agenda pack. I don't intend to go through the report in detail. The report is there for information, as there is an obligation for us to produce a report annually detailing the complaints received. And as you can see from the report, there are no recordable complaints that have been received during the last 12 months against the Commissioner or the Deputy Commissioner. So it's there for information.
No. Can I ask for a proposer, please? Thank you. And a seconder? Thank you. Thank you. And members to show their hands to note the report, please. Thank you very much. Item 11C is to consider the forward work programme for the North Wales Police and Crime Panel. Oh, sorry, yeah. Item 9B, the mid-year monitoring report from 1st of April to 30th of September.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take that. So that's on pages 47 to 56 for you. So the mid-year claim is low due to we didn't have any meetings till September. That was due to the local elections and the need to appoint a new panel. So members' expenses on page 56 are showing a 0, and it was too late to claim them in the last claim, so they will be claimed in the second period, which will be at the end of March. The report also advises of the number of meetings held and number of documents the panel has produced. Again, the report is for information. That's it, Chair. Thank you.
Any questions, comments? Councillor Bithell?
Could I just ask a question? I think it's in relation to 3.7. The formal PCP meetings have to be held in person. You know, with local authorities now, you know, we've come to the realization post-COVID that we can hold meetings quite capably and quite efficiently via Zoom and by Microsoft Teams and so on. I'm wondering whether it's an opportune time perhaps to approach the Home Office to change the regulations in relation to this and to catch up with the 21st century and actually allow these meetings to actually take place by Zoom. I mean, Welsh Government have accepted this sometimes part of the legislation in Welsh Government now to allow local authorities to actually have hybrid meetings or Zoom meetings and so on. Is it an opportune time for us to raise this? And again, it would save us a great deal of money, wouldn't it, as a police crime commission panel in terms of travel, time, energy, etc., you know, and save some of the pollution as well, which transpires from that. I'm just wondering whether it's worthwhile pursuing.
Okay, thank you for that. We've got a meeting with the Welsh.
Yeah, I don't think it would be the Home Office that we would speak to, I think, because we're governed by local authorities in England. We're governed by their legislation, not Home Office legislation. So I'd have to find out. They have made representation previously, but it was not taken on board. So I can find out whether there's any other way we can make such representation for you.
We've got a meeting next week, isn't it? Or with the WLGA? We could take it. We could look at that as well. Take it up, see if anybody else is interested in pushing it forward as well. Any other questions?
Coming back on that. Okay, we had the pre-meeting on Zoom or whatever, fair enough. But I think that a main meeting should be face-to-face in all councils, to be honest, but we're about the panel at the moment. And I don't think we should go on Zoom only. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So the forward plan is there. So our next meeting, has been said, is on the 30th of January, where you will consider the precept and the Police and Crime Commissioner and Chief Constable's medium-term financial plan. And like I say, if you've got any topics that you think you want putting on the agenda, if you contact me and we can advise you accordingly.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not much of a forward plan, is it? So we can come up with suggestions that we wish to sort of do our deep dive into, if you like, and bring you with enough notice. So it'd be good to have an agenda for the whole of next year, really, wouldn't it? Would have thought.
Given what Councillor Pugh and my interest, I think roads policing unit would be quite a suitable one to give us a presentation. I know we have a celebrity here, a former celebrity from the glass.
Add to that the 20-mile-an-hour limit that's coming in. Could we talk about that? I really feel the police are going to get it in the neck from law-abiding citizens like myself. Can we bring that into the legislation's coming in when? When's the big change? And you guys are going to be managing it.
Yeah, so that's next year, isn't it? But we can just put it forward, can't we? I think if you've got some idea, just chuck it, whatever you want to do.
How are we going to manage that?
And the other one, talking about hate crime, is the diversity unit. And I know the Federation are interested in coming to talk to us, but certainly roads policing unit and diversity for me.
Another thing which might be advantage just before the meeting started, we saying that if it's the high tech crime unit would be beneficial for us.
I'll discuss with Stephen when it's the appropriate time to bring these forward.
Doedd Lawen, pawb, diolch.